I went in the Navy on my 19th birthday in 1969, the Great Lakes. As I recall, boot camp was a pretty short period back then. They were rushing people through. It was during the Vietnam era. Left there, came to Jacksonville for aviation ordnance school till December '69. Went to another school for about 3 weeks here in Jacksonville. Went home for a week, and then on New Year's Eve of 1969, I checked on the America in Norfolk. Well, it was at night, and it was during Christmas season, so it was lit up pretty well. A lot of lights. Hard to explain. It was just, I didn't know what to expect. Although I just, I wasn't nervous or anxious or anything. It was an interesting evening, to say the very least. My first night on the ship. Shortly after the first of the year, we went to do carrier qualifications, and they'd been in the yards, I think, most of '69. So I went down to the Caribbean, down to Guantanamo, and came back from that. We're in port for a month or two, and then on April 10th we left for Vietnam. My division was G2 Division, and we handled air-to-air, air-to-ground missiles, anti-personnel, anti-tank bombs, SAM missiles, and so forth. So for the first Vietnam cruise, the magazines assembling missiles and testing missiles and so forth. It was a great cruise. We had some good ports, Subic Bay being the most common in the Philippines, Hong Kong, Japan, Sydney, Australia on the way home. That cruise we circumnavigated the Earth, which was interesting. Yeah, we went over across the South Atlantic and through the Indian Ocean, and then when we came back, we came down through the South Pacific and had a swim call in the Coral Sea before we went to Sydney, which was a lot of fun. It was the water was so blue, and the only anxious moment was to see the Marines in boats, launches, patrolling, looking for sharks. So it was. But I stood there on the deck edge elevator for a while and thought about it. I said, I'll probably only get one opportunity to do this, so you got to go. So you go. And when we got back underway, the XO came over and said he and the captain had discussed maybe coming up with a prize for the first person that came up with a handful of mud. And then he said, well, the water was 4.5 miles deep, so we thought that was probably unreasonable. So we went to Sydney, Australia for 3 days, which was wonderful, and after that we headed home. We just happened to cross the international date line on Thanksgiving, so we had Thanksgiving on one day, and we crossed the date line, had Thanksgiving again. They fed us turkey for both days. That was neat. Hit Rio on the way home, and then we got home just before Christmas of '70. Spent a short period in the yards in '71. Went to the Mediterranean. I thought that by then by the first of the year, I had been moved to the flight deck. There was 3 of us out of the 40-man division that worked the flight deck, and we were responsible for seeing that the load plans for the day were, which is basically what aircraft from each squadron was going to fly and what they were going to carry for weapons, to make sure that there were the right weapons on deck for those various launches. I didn't particularly care for the Mediterranean. I thought it was boring. Well, yeah. I didn't care for it. It was okay, but so we got back about Christmas time of '71. In '72, we were scheduled to go back to the Med in June. I came back from leave to bring my car home, and I had heard a rumor that maybe we weren't going back to the Med. And when I walked up on Pier 12, they were offloading the inert nuclear weapons, and I said, I guess we're not going back to the Med. And so on June 6th, I think, we left Pier 12, and out in the Chesapeake Bay, the captain came over and told us where we were going. And I think everybody on the ship was happy we were going. At least I was. I know the guys that I worked with were happy we were going back over there. It was, the ports were, we enjoyed more, and it was more exciting. The working on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier is probably the most exciting work. You have to pay attention, and it's very exciting. We spent, I don't recall when we got there, it takes about 30 days to transit from Norfolk to Subic Bay in the Philippines. We went to Singapore, Hong Kong. I think that was it, maybe Manila. I have some very vivid memories of that particular cruise because of a lot of things happened. I had my first Vietnam cruise. I didn't work on the flight deck, and I really didn't know what went on the roof. And during this cruise, it was different. I was on the flight deck 16, 18 hours a day during flight quarters, and got to know faces, and probably the most vivid memory. The CO of VA 35, Commander Donnelly, he always had a smile on his face. He had a beard, he had one of those old leather flying helmets, and every time he came up on deck, he was always smiling. And I remember one night, he went out on a midnight launch, I think, and he was carrying rock eyes the missile crew had to, we had to make sure that the proper weapons were on aircraft, what aircraft they were on, what the serial numbers were on all the missiles and bombs that were on. And so when the aircraft came back, we had to check the aircraft to see what was expended and account for the various serial numbers. And I remember that night that he went out, and we used to launch every hour and 45 minutes. And after the second launch, you'd recover the first launch. And his aircraft didn't come back. And so I went into flight deck control and asked, where at 525, whatever the number was, and they said they didn't know. So a lot of times, if aircraft would have problems, mechanical problems, they would just go to Da Nang and land on the ground. And so we launched the second launch, and the second launch recovered, and still no aircraft. And so I asked 2 or 3 times during the night, and they didn't know where he went. So what happened to him? And usually with the A6s, they did solo, low-level bombing runs. And somebody had told me in the squadron that somebody saw a flash in the sky where he was supposed to be. But anyway, about 20 years ago, I was checking a website. I think it was the America website or something associated with the America, and they had found his remains anyway. And it took a long time. But there were other pilots that we lost too. That one I didn't know him personally, but he just was such a happy-go-lucky guy, and just had an impact on me when I think about it. And but anyway, we 72, 73, we stayed there right up until the time that the peace agreement was signed, and we headed home sometime in February, and due to be home on the 24th of March. They were going to fly me home, and I said, look, it's only 30 days. I've been on the ship for over 3 years. Another 30 days isn't going to make a difference. And so we got home on March 24th of '73, which was the day I was scheduled to get out anyway.